If you're a foreign investor, if you're an Australian expatriate or an approved migrant or a new migrant looking to buy back in Australia or moving to Australia, you'll find that the buying market can be an absolute minefield for those without the experience and knowledge. I mean, let's face it, we most of us in our lifetime only buy a couple of properties, whether it's in your own country or in Australia. So it can be a recipe fraught with disaster. In fact, mostly in Australia, it's pretty much a seller's market. For every good property that comes on the market, there can be 2 or 3 and sometimes tens of buyers fighting to get that same property. And if it goes to an auction situation, that can be, even tougher. So it is a very difficult situation buying properties in Australia. And I've identified over the years 14 very common buying tips, or you could even call them buying errors that people make, but let's call them buying tips. So 14 buying tips for those who are living overseas, expatriates looking to return home, migrants looking to migrate to Australia, investors looking to buy in Australia. There's 14 common and very important buying tips. So one of the most important, I call it buying tip number 1, and it's actually one of the most important, but it's also one of those tips that I see most people leave and don't do and make mistakes on, and that is getting a mortgage before you start looking for property. Now, does that sound crazy, or do you think that most people would get a mortgage before looking? I can tell you from my experience, most people start looking for properties on realestate.com, domain.com, on the internet, talking to friends long before they know whether they can even get a mortgage to buy their dream property. It's very, very common. They look on the internet and then they say, let's buy a property. Let's get a place back home if you're an expatriate. Let's get a place we can move to if we're migrating. So look at these places. They look at the internet and they share it with family and friends, and they ask friends, is this a good location? What do you think of this house? Is this price good? And then they see a really good place. And this is very, very common. You think it's not common, but it's very, very common. So then they think, okay, well, obviously it's X dollars and we've only got half X dollars in cash. And even if we have the cash, maybe it's not a bad idea to get a mortgage so that we can keep some of that cash away. Or maybe it's a good investment decision to use leverage if we're going to be renting the property out and not put all our capital into buying the property. So they decide, well, let's get a mortgage. So how do they get a mortgage? They go online. They perhaps see online calculators. They put in the figures. So number 1A is don't use online calculators. They are completely inaccurate, and especially if you're living overseas, because it doesn't take into account overseas tax rates, overseas allowances, overseas bonuses, and it goes on and on. So don't rely on online calculators to determine whether you can borrow. Also, it's very important to know how much you can borrow. So you might look for a place for $1 million and you have $300,000 cash and you think you're going to borrow $700,000, but actually you may only have borrowing capacity for $600,000. So your $1 million property that you saw online and that you liked, you actually can only buy for $900,000. So all of that seems to make sense, but it is very, very common not to get your pre-approval, your loan pre-approval. You don't have to get your loan approved because you haven't got a property, but you can see a mortgage broker, give them all your information, and get a written loan pre-approval or an indicative pre-approval, which gives you an indication. So the broker through the banks will say, Mr. B, you can, on the information you've provided, borrow X dollars. You combine that with your cash, get a buyer's agent or an expert to give you the costs on the purchase, the stamp duty, the legal costs, and so on. And then you know your total purchasing power. Only and only at that point should you start looking for properties. I can't stress this enough, and I can't tell you again how many people go about it the wrong way. As a matter of fact, confession to make, I did it myself. I went about it the wrong way. So what had happened was I'd been living in Hong Kong, buying some investment apartments where you put 10% deposit down. You don't have to worry about your mortgage for 6 months or 12 months or 2 years. Those were the good old days. So I'd put a 10% deposit down, sometimes try to negotiate a 5% deposit, and in 6 months or 12 months start to look to get a mortgage. Now I had a pretty clear idea that I could get a mortgage, but I would actually go and finalize it. Now, so I have a little story that I often tell, and that is that when I went to buy my own family house, so you see I'd been living in Hong Kong and buying investment apartments by putting 10% deposit down, waiting 6 months or 12 months for the completion, sometimes 2 years. But that gives you plenty of time to line up all your ducks, put everything in a row, get your financing, work out the costs. Plenty of time. We decided we would look for a family house. So guess what? I looked on the internet and I found a great place. And best of all, it was in the same suburb that my best friend from school days with his wife and family were living in. Now they were renting, but they were living in that suburb. So I asked them if they could do me a favor and go and look at the house. It was open house. It was going to go to auction, I think. I can't quite recall now, it was a long time ago. But I asked them to go and have a look. And the wife rang us and said, it's a fantastic house. It's a beautiful family house. It's a great area. We live in the same suburb, just a couple of streets away. We can keep an eye on it for you if you're going to stay in Hong Kong while you rent it out. It's a beautiful family home. We can see your kids running out into the garden. And honestly, we got very, very excited. So we got the agent to send us all the videos and the photos and talk to him about price and what he thought we could buy it for. Anyway, I then went to the bank to get my mortgage, because if you buy an existing house, as I'm sure you all know, you have to come up with the money and complete in 30, sometimes 60 days, occasionally 90 days. So those were the days, the good old days you could say, but they were the days when you could get mortgages pretty quickly. You could get your mortgage in a couple of weeks. So 3 weeks later, I had my loan approval. It was in my budget. I could afford to buy the house. So I rang the agent and he said, guess what? I'm sorry, the house has been sold. That's very common. So that was when I learned that you don't go house hunting until you've got your mortgage in place. When I eventually found my own house to live in and I bought it, I was armed with a loan pre-approval. I knew exactly how much I could buy before I put an offer in, and I secured a fantastic house a couple of years later. So that is a very, very important buying tip. And please don't overlook it. Get your mortgage or your pre-approval in place before you start house hunting. If you would like a copy of the PDF, my ebook that explains all 14 common buying tips, it'll be down in the comments below. There'll be a link where you can download my full report on the 14 buying tips, specially designed for overseas buyers, migrants, expatriates, people looking to buy back home in Australia while living overseas.